Welcome back to another SUPboarder review, and this week it's time to look at the brand new board from Red Paddle Co., the 2017 14 feet Elite iSUP race board. Red Paddle Co. started making iSUPs back in 2008, and they're definitely one of the biggest iSUP brands out there, and they only make inflatable stand-up paddleboards. Specifications for the 14 foot Elite, obviously 14 foot long, 25 inches wide, 6 inches thick, 340 litres in volume. It only weighs 11 kilograms and it retails at 1149. The general overview shape of the board, 14 foot long, and it is relatively narrow, bringing itself into quite a dramatic pintail at the back. The fin setup of the board, it's a single US box fin setup with their Red Paddle Co. race fin. The materials that go into this Elite, well, we know Red Paddle Co. are very proud of their materials and how they process their boards. This is made with their MSL Fusion composite, which is a drop stitch internal core, and the MSL itself is where they put the PVC on, but instead of being a secondary layer, they put it all in one layer, so it's one thickness. Takes out the issues of gluing and excess gluing and dodgy looking gluing, and actually reduces all the boards by about 2 kilograms, which it did, and we saw that last year when we tested our 2016 boards. Who's the board designed for? Well, Red Paddle Co. say this board is designed for a racer who wants the ultimate 14 foot inflatable race board. So that's the internet bump. Let's move on to our SUPboard impressions. We tested the 2016 14 foot Elite last year, and to be honest, this board doesn't resemble it in the slightest. It's a completely different shape. It's only got the same things it's got as last year's board, as the handles are the same and the fin is the same and the fin box. Apart from that, it's a completely different shape of board, different things going over it, going on it, features on it. So let's talk about the shape first of all. As I said, 25 wide and 14 foot long. It is a speed needle, and definitely there's quite a pronounced, so about a foot back from where you stand, the tail really comes into a fine pintail, which is really going to help that straight line performance and getting you going as fast as possible with the least amount of paddle changes either side. Totally different shape. The other 14 foot standard race board has got a more of a traditional sort of rounded tail, and also the 12.6 Elite as well has got a slightly wider tail. This sort of board lends itself to paddling straight and fast. It's a bit trickier to do your step back turns because of the pulled in tail, because you haven't got as much width for stability. So it's designed to paddle in a straight fast line, really good for those long distance races, getting your head down and just paddling hard. Other new features, let's go for the smaller new features you might not notice first, and then to the largest one at the end. The other new features we have is the RSS battens. Same batten, slightly further back than last year. Last year in the video we were saying how the batten's been pushed further forward, but now they've brought it back again, and they've put these nice Velcro tabs that hold the batten ties down, which is a really smart little feature they put on the board. So the RSS battens are there, but they're moved further back. Deck pads very similar to their one last year, and all the other boards, they're all very nice quality deck pad, all cut in nicely and finished off perfectly. Leashing point in the deck pad, valves the same as last year, all that sort of stuff. More handles, carry handles and stuff. There is not a central carry handle on this board, and the main reason is because there is something else in its place, and it's taken up by this batten here down the center of the board, which is called a forward flex control. We'll go a little bit more how it feels on the water in a minute. Let's keep on going the features of the board. You've also got things called ram mounts, which you can use for holding GPSs, fishing rods and all that sort of stuff. Not that you put a fishing rod on a 14 foot race board, but they're basically a screw thread, and that's also in this front moulding section, so you can put stuff on that. It's a very nice little feature. Looking at the bottom of the board, same sort of outline bottom shape as we had in the last year's board. They're basically trying to be as flat as possible, a small amount of nose kick at the front there. The biggest thing is the nose runner has got a vast improvement in shape to it. It's much more hydrodynamic, it's got a much more sort of piercing shape to it, and we really feel it would work much better than the older one, which is a bit clunky if you ask us. This one is a really refined piece of Red Paddle Co. R&D, so that's a nice feature on the top there. This fin is exactly the same as last year's 2016 board. It's a great fin then, it's a great fin now. And also the US box is the same as the Red Paddle Co.'s last year. Very slim line, fits the fin well. Keeping on the 2017 features, let's move on to the bag and pump. Now the bag this year looks very much the same as last year's from the outside, but they have changed a few minor things, all for the better, I'll say. The bag feels a little bit lighter straight away. They've also put reflective tape, or not reflective tape, reflective material on the inside of the bag, which is obviously going to keep the board nice and cool when traveling. Feels a little bit more hard wearing. They've put more webbing in around the zip area, so it really isn't going to fail. Same carry handles and backpack and all that sort of great stuff they had before. But the biggest change is you've got an internal pouch area in here, which is basically designed to carry your paddle. Bungee straps to hold your three-piece paddle, and there's actually graphics to where you put your paddle parts. Nice little feature for your three-piece, which you generally do have when you have got an inflatable board because you want it all to go in one bag. Moving on to the pump, the Titan, the Great Titan pump. It's the same, similar sort of thing as the bag. It looks straight away on the outset that it hasn't had lots of changes. Graphics and size and everything is still very similar. But the pump itself, it's had what the most major change you notice. If you're used to using an iSUP or pumping up an iSUP before, you might have been aware of that issue when you put your valve in, you take it apart and it lets all the air out and it's a disaster and you scare half the dogs on the beach. Well, that used to be because there was a bar coming across the center of the valve, and when you used to screw it in, the bar used to push the internal valve down, but then when you let it out, the valve wouldn't release, it wouldn't come back up. So they removed the internal crossbar, which you can do on all iSUP pumps, but the problem with that is when you're pumping the board up, the pressure gauge goes up and comes back down again, up and comes back down again. So it's very hard to get a true reading. What Red Paddle Co have done this year have made their pump hold the pressure. So you can pump the board up, it's at 15 psi, you can stop pumping, you can talk to your mates, and it will stay at 15 psi. Then you can come back and pump it up again. The recommended pressure is up to 22 psi now on this, so they really recommend between 15 and 22, and this board itself is pumped up to 18 psi. So now you don't have that back draft issue, and also it'll hold the pressure in the pump the whole time. It's just a nice little feature, more refinement again. And also you get a multiple different amount of clips and attachments for kites and lilos and, don't talk about lilos do we, inflatable stuff that you can use. So you can use the pump for multiple different things, which is a handy little thing to have, you know, especially if you're adding up the pennies to what the difference is between certain boards and brands. The pressure gauge is nice and slick. They've also got different pressure gauges on there for a like your inflatables, your kites, and also your recommended PSI for your inflatable paddle boards. If you're unsure about how the Titan works, it's got two cylinders, so it's got a large cylinder and a small cylinder. When the red screw thread is in, that means when on the downstroke you pump with both cylinders. So both these cylinders are producing air and putting it to the board. When you take the screw top out here, the red one, it pumps on the single chamber. So it's designed when the pumping gets hard, you move on to the single chamber and you finish your high pressure board off on the single chamber. It's definitely the fastest pump on the market. We've done pump tests on this pump and several pumps. I'll put the link on the video so you can see our pump tests. The Red Paddle Co Titan, a little bit more refined since last year. Performance of the board, when we were testing the board, we pretty much had it in picture perfect flat conditions, which is great, but at the same time it would be nice to test it in some choppier sort of conditions. It does perform really well on the flat, and it does paddle in extremely well in a straight line. I mean, you can put your head down, you can not really concentrate where you're going, and you still are pointing to where you aimed at before you put your head down. And it does stay on that same paddle side. You can keep on that paddle stroke on one side for probably 3 to 4 more times than you would do on a standard sort of square-tailed inflatable race board. The downside to that great straight line performance is it's a little bit trickier to do those step back turns, so you are going to have to sort of tune your standing position. You have to get right on the back to get the step back turns in, to get right over that pin tail, so it's a little bit wobblier than a standard square tail racer board, so it's just something to be aware of. Okay, let's talk about this brand new forward flex control system. Now straight away you'll notice this has a patent number on it. This has been patented by Red Paddle Co. This is definitely the only race up that has this sort of technology and has this R&D behind it. So how does it work? Well, okay, so it's a carbon rod that goes through these eyelets into a point at the end there to make the board stiff. The way to put it together is you basically pump the board up a little bit, you slide the rod into this position so it's loose and not in the cam lock, and then you have to inflate the board to about 20 or about 16 to 20 psi. You need to get the board stiff, and you actually need to get the board to stretch a slight tiny amount. The reason then, because you don't imagine the board stretching, but because these are PVC, these boards will stretch, and then you can push the rod right into the nose of the board, then you can slip it into the cam system here, and then you can push down on the locking point, which then extends the rod, pushes it into the nose, and flattens out your board even more. The actual fittings and the design of this system is absolutely perfect. I can't see a fault with it, and it works really well. When we first did it, we didn't have it pumped up enough, and it was a bit hard work to get in. You've got to pump it up enough. That's the biggest thing. It's a massive difference. You pump it up enough, get 16 to 22 psi in it, and suddenly the board gets stiffer, longer, and the rod goes in really easy, and then you can push it back very easily. Got to pump it up enough. Moving on to how it feels. it's definitely stiffer. It definitely makes a massive difference to the nose of the board. We did enter, when you're entering into small chop or boat wake, the board just stays in a stiff position. But what we really liked as well is because they've molded the plastic nose at the front there, it does actually shred a bit of water off. So it's actually another feature that they put in that actually shreds the water off. So I would say in a downwind situation, you've got another helping hand. We'd love to have tested this in downwind conditions, but we didn't. But we think that it would have shredded water off, and the stiffness would have made the board much easier to surf downwind. Because then as you moved back on the board to get the nose up, the board would have stayed in that stiff horizontal position, and it would have tilted up and down much easier. Moving on to our deflection test, I'll give you an idea of deflection. Okay, last year's Red Paddle Co Elite got 11 millimeters in deflection, which is basically where we put a gap of 1.5 meters apart, and we put the board in the center, and we put 75 kilograms on the middle, and then we measured the drop. So that dropped 11 millimeters. Other iSUPs, they go up to about 18. Okay, so that's quite a varied difference there. This one did 10. Okay, so it's only 1 millimeter less than last year's board, so 10 millimeters isn't very much of a drop at all. Definitely the stiffest board we've ever tested, and that was at 18 psi as well. That wasn't even at 22, so it could probably even go more than that. Negatives or downsides to the brand new 2017 Red Paddle Co 14-foot Elite. Right, one negative, really nice if the deck pad was a bit more pronounced or had a tail kick at the back there. Now you notice how this is it's a diamond deck pad here, and then it goes to a smooth deck pad. You can feel it barefoot, so you know where your feet are, but if this was a little bit more pronounced, as in so you knew where your foot was for the step back turns, it would be easier. And ideally, a bit of a kick pad. Had a bit of a kick pad, the board would be completely perfect. Another thing that you could find a negative for some people is if you're looking for a board to just pump up and get out in the water quickly and paddle fast, maybe not look towards this sort of thing. If you're looking at a board that you want to pump up, tune it, get it on the water, get it stiff as possible, then this is the board, because it's a little bit of a faff. If you feel that you have to use this forward flex control system every time to put it in, it's a bit of a faff. It's going to take you another 3 or 4 minutes to get on the water. You know, we used to just pumping up rice, that's putting a fin in, away we go. So it takes a little bit more work to tune it. As I say, some people might find it a faff, and some people might love it because it's that tunable race side that they haven't got on any other iSUP. Value for money, what, £1,149. It's probably the most expensive iSUP on the market, but to be honest, it's not that much more expensive than other boards, and it has got absolutely everything. It's got carbon rods, it's got RSS battens, it's got a nice fin, it's got carrier handles everywhere. Who should be looking at this board? Well, it's definitely fast and it's definitely stiff, and it ticks the super light box as well, but you've got to be around that sort of 55 to 90 kilograms. I mean, you could be lighter than that, but 90 kilograms I reckon is the top level. You could get on it if you were heavier because it's got the volume at 340 litres, but it's just a little bit narrow if you're any taller. I think if you're a tall person in the 6'2", 3s marks, you might find it a little tricky just because of the width at 25 wide. If you're 90 kilos and below and you want a super fast board to just basically kick ass on the racing scene, this is probably the one to look at. Overall SUPboarder verdict, well, it is the fastest iSUP raceboard we have ever paddled so far, and it has got completely everything on it, from rods to RSS bands to super light internal cores. It's a very nice board to paddle if you want that straight line performance out of an iSUP. Hope you found this SUPboarder review interesting and informative, and it makes those SUP buying decisions a little bit easier. For more interesting reviews and written reviews and features and technique videos, visit supboardermag.com and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.